Hello students, in previous video, that is PPT module PPT 3.1, we have seen the embedded system versus general computing. We have seen the application areas of the embedded systems. We have seen the purpose of embedded systems. So all these things we have seen in the first PPT, that is in previous video. In this video we are going to see all these points, that is core of an embedded systems we are going to see. After that, general purpose and domain specific processors. So in that we have three specifically mentioned processors like microprocessors, microcontrollers, digital signal processors. So these are the three things we are going to study in general purpose and domain specific processors, and after that we are going to study application specific integrated ICs, and generally they call it as a ASICs, ASAS ICs. And after that we are going to see the programmable logic devices and commercial off the shelf components, or they call it as a COTS generally. Okay, now we'll see the core of an embedded system. See here, in core of an embedded system, as mentioned in the previous video, embedded systems are domain specific and application specific. You can see here, embedded systems are domain specific and application specific, and core of any embedded system fall under any one of the following category. So we have four categories mentioned here. So the embedded system which you are using, so that may fall under any one of the following four categories. So first one is general purpose and domain specific processors. So in that we are going to see these three things: microprocessor, microcontrollers and DSPs, or digital signal processors. And after that we are going to see ASICs, ASICs, programmable logic devices, and commercial off the shelf components, COTS. One more thing you have to remember here: if you examine any embedded system, it will be built around any one of the core units mentioned above. So it may be any one of the four units what I have mentioned here. So any embedded system, it may consist of any one of the following. So that one you have to remember. Now we'll go to first point, that is general purpose and domain specific processors. So one of the important thing we should notice, 80% of the embedded systems in the world are processor or controller based, and these may be either microprocessors, or they may be either microcontrollers or DSP based. So that you should remember. So whatever the embedded systems around the world, that is 80% of the embedded systems around the world we are using, they fall under these three categories. That is, either it may be using microprocessor, it may be using microcontroller, or DSPs, or digital signal processors. So first one we'll see the microprocessors. So here, one of the any core operation of any microprocessor is it is capable of performing arithmetic and logical operations. That you should remember. That is, one of the core operation of any microprocessor is to perform ALU operations, that is arithmetic and logical operations, and it is a silicon chip representing a CPU. That you should remember. So here this is a silicon chip representing ALU. You can see a silicon chip representing ALU, and it consists of this thing, ALU, so that it will perform the ALU operations. And here each processor has certain predefined instruction set which is specific to manufacturers. There are n number of manufacturers available for the microprocessor, and for each manufacturer will have a different predefined instruction sets. Each manufacturer can use a different predefined instruction set for the manufacturing of that product. That is, and one more thing you have to remember, right from the first generation to fourth generation, right from the first generation to fourth generation embedded systems, nowadays there are fifth generation embedded systems also available. So they have predefined instruction sets. All of them have a predefined dedicated instruction sets, and that too depend on the manufacturer. That you should remember. And these instruction sets are specific to the manufacturer. That is also very important. Okay, and you can see here one more point. Intel 4004 is the first processor developed by Intel. So this is Intel 4004 is the first processor developed by Intel, which is a 4-bit processor with 1K data memory, 4K program memory with 16 4-bit GPRs. They have mentioned here 16 4-bit GPR means there are 16 4-bit general purpose registers are there, and 46 instruction sets are there with the operating frequency of 740 kilohertz. So this Intel 4004 has it is a 4-bit data processor with 1K data memory, that is 1 kilobytes of data memory. 1K means that you have to take it as a 1 kilobyte of data memory, and 4K means 4 kilobytes of program memory with there are 16 4-bit GPRs are there, general purpose registers, and 46 instructions it is having, and it is operating at the frequency of 740 kilohertz. And advances in the semiconductor industry, bringing a new dimension to new age processor in 21st century. And nowadays you can see that manufacturers are coming with 32 and 64-bit processors that we have seen in the previous PPT, that is 4th generation fourth generation embedded systems or 4th generation processors we have. So all they have either 32 or 64-bit processors which can operate on here, which can operate on, you can see here I have mentioned 2 megahertz to 4 megahertz operating frequency, but actually it should be, you correct that, it should be 2 gigahertz to 4 gigahertz. That is the correction you have to make. So you please correct that in the PPT. That should be 2 gigahertz to 4 gigahertz operating frequency. And so nowadays the processors are coming with 64-bit microprocessors, and which can operate on operating frequency of 2 gigahertz to 4 gigahertz. And what are the key market players. So Intel is one of them, you know already. AMD and Freescale is one of them. IBM is the one of the manufacturer. TI, that is Texas Instruments, and Hitachi, and many of their. These are the key players in the processor market today. Okay, and after that, two common system architectures for processor design are Harvard and Von Neumann architecture. We have seen that, and we have seen that. What do you mean by Harvard and Von Neumann architecture? In TCM and Cache part of the core extensions in module 1, in TCM and Cache part of the core extension part, in the module 1 we have seen what is this Harvard and Von Neumann architecture. If you want, you can check, you can go through that. Harvard and Von Neumann, we will see in detail what is this in the upcoming slides only. And two commonly used instruction set architectures, they call it as generally ISAs. They are RISC and CISC. All of you may know what do you mean by RISC and CISC. So RISC is a reduced instruction set architecture, and CISC is a complex instruction set architecture. So these are the two ISAs. The manufacturers may use they may either use these Harvard and Von Neumann architecture, or they may be using any one of the ISA along with that. That is, it may be RISC or CISC architectures. Okay. So this is about the microprocessors. Now we'll see microcontroller part. So in module 1 only, we have seen comparison between microprocessor and microcontrollers. From that, you can remember that it has the necessary functional box. It has the necessary functional box for independent working. That's why you can see greater use of microcontrollers in embedded systems compared to the microprocessors. And some of the important important points. So some of the important parts which are readily there with the microcontroller are it contains CPUs. It is highly integrated chip that contains CPU, RAM, and SPRs and GPRs array. So what do you mean by SPR and GPR array? What do you mean by SPR and GPR array? We'll see here this SPR and GPR. So SPR is a special purpose registers, and GPRs is a general purpose register array. So it may be having SPRs and GPRs. It is containing CPU, RAM, and on-chip ROM, that is read-only memory or flash memory for program storage, and timer and interrupt control units and dedicated IO ports are there in the microcontroller. So again, we have discussed some of the famous microcontrollers in the previous class itself, in module 1 itself. Once again we will see that what are the famous microcontroller manufacturers available, and one more important point is they are cheap and cost effective and are readily available in the market. So these are cheap and cost effective and are readily available in the market. There are n number of manufacturers depending on the requirement from the user. They are developing the different microcontrollers, and Texas Instruments has developed one of the first microcontroller. That is world's first microcontroller was developed by Texas Instruments. That is TMS 1000 is considered as the world's first microcontroller. And some of the important microcontrollers families used in embedded systems are 8051 family, and the electronic students are very familiar with this 8051 family, and PIC microcontroller. These two are the very important microcontroller families widely used in the market. And other than that, there are AVR microcontrollers, there are Atmel microcontrollers, and other than that, there are PIC microcontroller is one of the famous microcontrollers they have used. So these are the many families which are famous and widely used in the embedded market. And the manufacturers are, once again, Intel is one of the manufacturer, Texas Instruments, Freescale, Philips, Atmel, Analog Devices, Toshiba, Hitachi, Sharp, Silicon Laboratories, and many more are there, and these are the key players in the microcontroller market today. And high processing speed microcontrollers like ARM11 are also available in the market for high processing capability. So we have seen the ARM7, and we have seen the differences, evolution of ARM processors from ARM to ARM10, ARM11 in previous classes. So the high processing speed microcontrollers like ARM11 are also available in the market for high processing capability. And in previous module, one more thing we have to remember. We have explained that the ISA, that is instruction set architecture of microcontroller, is RISC based. That you should remember. But here we are saying that the instruction set architecture of microcontroller can be either RISC based or it may be either CISC based. So here we are making one change here. So in previous class we have told that in the previous module it is RISC based, but we are now saying that the evolution of the microcontroller has taken in such a way that the instruction set architecture, that is ISA, can be either RISC or CISC based here. And that is, you can use it for both the purposes. And microcontrollers can be designed for either general purpose application requirements or domain specific application requirements. That is, you can use these for both the purposes. You can use it for the general purpose also applications, for developing general purpose applications, and you can use it for the domain specific applications also we can use. So this is about the microcontroller part. So we have seen both microprocessors and microcontrollers. Now we are going to see the third point in general purpose and domain specific embedded systems. So that is, the third point is DSP, that is digital signal processors. So whenever there is a need to process audio, video, image and communication signals by embedded systems, so these DSPs come into action there. So unless there is this type of data available, it is very unfair to use the DSPs. And whenever there is a data like image, like audio, video and communication signals are there for the embedded systems, so in that case the DSPs are the best suitable processors to use. And they are powerful yet special purpose 8, 16 or 32-bit processors designed for the purpose is mentioned above. So what is, for which purpose we are mentioning, for which purpose we are using those DSPs, we have mentioned here in this point. and they are powerful yet special purpose. Either it may be 8-bit processor, 16-bit DSP processor, or 32-bit DSP processor designed for the purposes mentioned above. We have mentioned the for which purpose we are using, and they are 2 to 3 times faster than general purpose microprocessors. That you should remember. So they are 2 to 3 times faster compared to general purpose microprocessors in signal processing applications specifically. So in signal processing applications, these DSPs are 2 to 3 times faster than general purpose microprocessors. Okay, and one more important point is DSPs implement algorithm in hardware, and whereas the processor algorithms are implemented in firmware or software, which are slow because they need or they depend on the system clock for the execution of the instruction. And while the DSPs implement the algorithm is in hardware, they don't require any system clock. That is, the time waiting is not there. So that's why it speeds up the execution. That is, implementing algorithm in hardware, that is DSPs implement algorithms in hardware, whereas the processor implements algorithm in firmware or software. That's why we say that DSPs are fast compared to the microprocessors. And along with this DSP, we have the peripherals attached like program memory, data memory, computational units, and I/O ports. These form the key units of any digital signal processor. So what are the key units of digital signal processors? Program memory, data memory, computational unit, and I/O ports. These four form the key units of any digital signal processors. And audio video signal processing and telecommunication and multimedia application are the typical examples where DSP is used. So here in the first point itself, we have seen what is the need of why we are using DSPs. That is, whenever there is a need of audio and video processing, so in that case definitely we need DSP. And along with that, in communication systems like telecommunications and multimedia applications, whenever there are multimedia applications are there, typically we are using DSPs there. And DSPs can be used in application where large amount of real-time calculation has to make. So whenever there is a need of large amount of real-time calculations, so in that case we are using DSPs rather than microprocessors and microcontrollers. So such calculations may be, we can take an example of sum of product calculations, SOPs, that we have seen in the ADE, analog and digital electronics. Sum of product form we have seen. So to calculate such SOP calculations, we use these DSP processors. To calculate the fast Fourier transforms, that is FFTs, and discrete Fourier transform, DFTs, and convolution, and there is one more thing called circular convolutions. So in all these cases, whenever there are complex calculations, we are going to use the DSPs there. And key market players are once again the Texas Instruments, that is TI, Synopsys, and National Semiconductors, Altera, etc. These are the very famous DSP manufacturers available in the market today. And one of the very famous example of DSP processors is a TMS 320 series. So the TMS 320 series is the DSP processors. There are n number of processors of this series, and they are very famous among all the DSP processors. So this is about the digital signal processors. So here we have seen the general purpose and domain specific processors. In that we have seen microprocessors, microcontrollers, and digital signal processors. Now we'll see the difference between microprocessor and microcontroller. Now we'll see the microprocessor and microcontroller part, that is the difference between microprocessor and microcontroller. The first difference you can see here, that the definition of the microprocessor and microcontrollers only take the first point here for the comparison. You can see here microprocessor, it is a silicon chip representing CPU which is capable of performing ALU operations. So that is what we have mentioned in the microprocessor definition only in previous slide. And whereas the microcontroller, it is a highly integrated chip that contains CPU, RAM, SPRs, GPRs array, and on-chip ROM or flash memory for program storage, timer, interrupt control units, and dedicated I/O ports. They form the microcontroller part. And the second one you can see here, it is dependent unit. So that is, it requires combination of other components like timer, counter, program, and data memory chips, interrupt controller, etc. for functioning. So in microcontroller you can see that all they are already there with the microcontroller chip. The microcontroller with the microcontroller part, you can see all these components already there, but they are not available with the microprocessor here. That's why the microcontroller is a self-contained unit, or we call it as an independent unit compared to the microprocessor. That's why we call it microprocessor as a dependent unit, because it does not have all the components that are available with the microcontroller. And you can see here the microcontroller is a self-contained unit. It does not require external components for its functioning. So that you should remember. So without any external components, it can function normally. The third one you can see here, mostly they are general purpose in design. So all the microprocessors what they are developing, almost all of them are general purpose in the design point of view, whereas the microcontrollers are application or domain specific designs. So according to the requirement, the microcontrollers are developed by the manufacturers according to the requirement. That's why we call it as a application or domain specific designs. And fourth point you can see here, we need external peripherals interface ICs for I/O operations. That is, we need some extra IC or hardware to be connected to it for the I/O operations in case of microprocessors. But that is not the case with the microcontroller, because most of them are built up with multiple built-in I/O ports, but that is not necessary in the microprocessor. We need a external peripheral interface ICs there in the microprocessors. And fifth point you can see here, that they are targeted for high-end markets where performance is critical. So again we have seen that, like air traffic control systems, and one more example is weather forecasting system, you can consider as an example. So if you consider such high-end markets where performance is critical means you need a time bound there. So in such cases they are using microprocessors are using those in those areas. And whereas in microcontrollers, they are targeted for embedded markets where performance is not at all a critical. That is, the performance is not a critical here, just the application and domain specific design is a key factor here in microcontroller, whereas the performance is key factor in microprocessor. And one more point here is limited power saving options are there compared to microcontrollers here, and we have a lot of power saving options available here. So because it is a microprocessors are almost CISC based processors, they have complex in design, and since they are complex in design, the power requirement for the execution of the instruction is also more here. So that's why the power saving options are less here, that is limited compared to the microcontroller. So these are the comparison you can make it out between the microprocessor and microcontroller. Now we will see the difference between RISC and CISC processors. So here you can see as the name suggests, that is reduced instruction set architecture. RISC means reduced instruction set computer. So here the less number of instructions are there, as the name suggests here. Similarly, in the CISC there are more number of instructions are there, or instead of more we can say it is a greater number of instructions are there compared to the RISC instructions. And the second point you can see here, increased execution speed due to the instruction pipelining, and there is no pipelining feature is available in the CISC, that you should remember. So that is pipelining is available only in the RISC processors, and they are not and that is not available with the CISC processors. And we have seen that pipelining, 3-stage pipelining, 5-stage pipelining, and 6-stage pipelining. All these pipelining methods we have seen that are all associated with the RISC processors or RISC architectures. Okay, and now the third point we will see here, large number of general purpose registers are available in the RISC processors, whereas only limited number of general purpose registers are available in CISC processors. And one more thing we have to remember, most of the operations are performed on registers only except memory instructions using load and store. That is, most of the operations are performed on registers only in the RISC architectures. We have seen that. So if you consider ARM7, it has around 30 plus general purpose registers, and most of the operations you can perform using those registers, and you can use registers for all the operation except memory instructions, where we are using load and store instructions, that is LDR and STR instructions are there. And whereas in CISC processors, operations are performed on register as well as memory according to the instructions. So you can directly access the memory here. The instruction can directly access the memory in CISC, whereas you cannot access the memory directly. That is, registers cannot access the memory directly. They need the help of load and store instructions in RISC architecture or RISC processors. And one more point is, instruction sets are orthogonal, as almost all the instructions can be applicable on general purpose registers. So if you consider any instructions that is available with the ARM, if you consider ARM processor, the add instruction is there, multiple MUL instruction is there, SUB, that is sub instruction is there, and there are multiply and accumulate, that is MLA instruction is there. There are n number of instructions available. So all these instructions are so you can use all these instructions for using any of the GPUs, and instruction sets are non-orthogonal in CISC. So if you consider any general purpose registers, you can apply any instructions what I mentioned till now. You can apply any instructions to any one of the general purpose. So that is not the case with the CISC processors. That's why the register set is non-orthogonal here. Okay, and one more important point is this one we have mentioned, the instructions are of fixed length. That is, in the ARM case only we have told that many instructions are executed in a single cycle. Almost all of the instructions are executed in a single cycle, and that's why we call it as a fixed length instructions. Whereas the CISC processors, they are of variable length instructions. Some instruction may take 2 machine cycles, some instruction may take 3, 4, like that. So the instruction sets are of variable length here, and because of the reduced instruction set, writing program become complex in RISC processors. Using those limited instructions only, you are going to implement the algorithm here, so that becomes complex here. But the large number of instructions available in the CISC processors make it very easy to write the simple programs using those instructions, because they have provided many instructions. Using those instructions you can make any complex algorithm into a simple one. So that's why it is easy to write program in CISC rather than in RISC. And one more important point is they come with the Harvard architecture. This is what we have said, Harvard architectures, whereas the CISC processors are they can be of Harvard or Von Neumann architecture. So this is also we have seen. In the next PPT we will see the same here, the differences between Harvard and Von Neumann architecture. Now we will see the differences between Harvard architecture and Von Neumann architecture. So as I have mentioned, the Harvard architecture has a separate bus for instruction and data fetching, whereas the Von Neumann architecture, where the single bus is shared between the program and that is data and instruction fetching. You can see here the single bus is shared between the IO and data, that is instruction and data, whereas there are separate instructions and there are separate buses. There is a different 2 buses are there for data as well as the instruction. You can see here there is a CPU and program memory. We have a single dedicated bus for the instruction fetching, whereas there is a separate bus for fetching a data between CPU and data memory. So that you should remember. So you can see here once again there is a separate bus for instruction set and data fetching in Harvard architecture, whereas there is a shared bus for both data as well as instruction between the CPU and IO and CPU and memory in Von Neumann architecture style. And one more important point is this architecture helps to implement pipelining. So with the Harvard architecture you can implement the pipelining, because since it is having 2 separate buses for instruction as well as data, we can easily implement the Harvard architecture, or you can easily implement the pipelining feature here. But it is very difficult to implement because we are having only single bus that is shared between data and instruction fetching. That's why you cannot use this architecture for pipelining, and because of the pipelining it achieves high performance. The Harvard architecture achieves high performance, because of this pipelining. Because since it is supporting pipelining, the performance is better in Harvard architecture. Because it is not supporting pipelining in von Neumann architectures, that's why we call it as a low performance compared to the Harvard architectures. And comparatively, implementing Harvard architecture is high cost, because we are using the instructions because we are using the separate bus for the two instruction and data fetching. As the design part is getting complex here, the comparatively it is having high cost compared to the von Neumann architectures. That's why comparatively the von Neumann architecture is cheaper. And no memory alignment problems is there with the Harvard architectures, whereas it allows self-modifying codes, so that we'll see. And no accidental corruption of program memory, as data and programs are stored separately in different physical memory locations. Since there is a different since there are two different buses for the instruction and data, along with that bus we have different memory for instruction storing and data storing. So since there is no accidental corruption of the program memory, as data and programs are separately stored there. The data is stored in the data memory by the data bus, whereas the instruction is stored in the or instruction can be fetched from the instruction memory by the instruction bus. So since there are two buses for the two blocks, you can see here two buses for the two blocks, there is no accidental corruption occurring, whereas data memory and program memory are stored physically in the same chip. Because why you are storing in the same chip in von Neumann? Because there is only one bus available. That's why there is a chance of accidental corruption of the program memory is there. So because of that single shared memory, a single shared bus, there is a chance of accidental corruption of the program memory. It may occur there in the von Neumann, but it is but such case is not there in Harvard architecture style. Okay, once again you can go through this diagram. That is in Harvard architecture style. In the below figure you can see here there are two black arrow marks, so that represents that represents a bus. So in between CPU and program memory, so whatever that black arrow mark is there, that is bidirectional bus, we can say. So that is instruction bus, whereas that is used for instruction fetching, whereas that bidirectional bus between CPU and data memory, that can be used for data fetching. And in the von Neumann architecture, that is in the first diagram, you can see that at the last you can see one long line, that is bidirectional line you can see. So that is your single shared bus. That single bus is shared between IO and CPU and memory. So this is the Harvard and von Neumann architecture styles. And one more important thing we are going to study here is big endian versus little endian processors or controllers. So what we are going to see here is what do you mean by big endian and the big endian and little endian processors. So what is that? We'll see here. Each processor or controller has different instruction size. So according to the manufacturer, depending on the manufacturer or depending on the architecture, the processor may be either 8-bit, 16-bit or 32-bit. So the same is applied with the controller also. In multi-byte systems, that is where the processors whose word size is greater than 1 byte. what do you mean by word size is the memory where we are storing the data. So that we call it as a word size. Don't confuse here, word means it is a 16-bit data. That this word size may be different for different processors. For one of the processor, this word size may be 1 byte 1 byte, that is 8 bit of data. For one more processor, this word size may be 16 bit, and for one more processor this word size may be 32 bit. Like that, depending on the processors, this word size may change. So what is here is mentioned here is, in multi-byte system, when the processor whose word size is greater than 1 byte, we come across these two concepts. So we have seen the memory accessing in the lab programs, or you are storing the byte of data, or you are storing the data from register to the internal RAM. So you are storing that data, that is 32-bit data, in internal RAM, and your internal RAM, this the internal RAM, what we are in internal RAM, the word size here, the ARM processors which we have used, that is of 8 bit. So you can see that if you store any one 32-bit data in the internal RAM, that is starting from the address 0x40000000, so in that memory location we have divided that memory location, that is 32-bit memory location, into 4 sections as 8-bit, that is 4 8-bit sections. And you have seen that 32-bit data that which is available in the register, that can be stored to that memory locations 0x40000000, that is divided into 4 parts. That's why you have seen the memory location is filled with each memory location is filled with two digits there. That is 2 digits means each digit corresponds to 4 bits. That's why 8 bit of information corresponds to 2 digits totally. That you are going to see in the lab programs. So here also, example, suppose the word length is 2 byte, then the 2 byte data can be stored in two different way. Suppose the word length is 2 byte. 2 byte means here it is a 16-bit information. So that 2 byte of information can be stored in two different way. So what are the ways available here? One is little endian, one is big endian. So what is little endian is, you can see here, higher order data byte is stored in higher memory location, and lower order data byte is stored in lower memory location. So better you don't get confused between little endian and big endian here. Just you see the diagram here, little endian and big endian. You can see in the, you can see here, here in this section I have mentioned the memory address, you can see, for both, and the first memory address, that is internal RAM address. So here I have considered specifically, I have considered for ARM processor. For ARM processor, that is for ARM 7 processors, the internal RAM starts from this 0x40000000, this address. So that's why I have considered this. So in the textbook they have mentioned some different address, but I have considered this address only. So these corresponds to the memory addresses, and you can see here on both the side, here as well as here, and that is, and what I have mentioned here is the each memory location is of, can store a data of 8 bit of information or 8 bit of data. So here it is performing 8 bit, or it is storing 8 bit of data. Here also it is storing 8 bit of data. Like that, in all the bytes you may store maximum 8 bit of information. Okay, and so the first address is 0x4000, and what will be the next address? Considering so for 1 byte of information it is storing 4. The memory address location is this one, 4000. The next memory location is 4000. 0001. The next memory location is 4000 0002 Same here also, you can see the memory location, and here each memory location is storing 1 byte of data. That you should remember, and that's why in the ARM also whenever you consider 0x4000 0000, so what is the next memory location you are considering? The next memory location we are considering is 0x4000 0004. See here, the first memory location is 0-0, that is mentioned here, and what will be the next memory location? Here it will be 4004. So this 4 bytes of data will be stored in these 4 memory locations. That constitutes a 32-bit data. That constitutes a total 32-bit data. So that's why this 0x4000 0000 memory location, it is the starting address of this 32-bit information, whereas the next memory location will be this one, 0x4000 0004. And you can see one more thing here. So I think it is clear that the memory address, how we are mentioned here in both the cases. Now we will see the base address. So base address is nothing but the first memory address. Again here also the base address is nothing but the first memory address. Next, base address plus 1 is nothing but you have to add 1 with the base address, so that you will get the next memory address here. Once again you have to add base address with 2, so that you will get the next memory address, or you can add 1 for this address, for the previous address, so that you will get the next memory location. Again if you add 1 for the previous memory address, you will get the next memory location here. Similarly here also the base address is this one. Again the base plus 1 address is this, base plus 2 is this address, and base plus 3 is this address. Now we have, I think it is clear that how we have mentioned the base addresses and memory addresses. Now what I have mentioned here is byte 0, byte 1, byte 2, byte 3. Here also byte 3, byte 2, byte 1 and byte 0. So this is nothing but the data. So that the data which is available in the register you can consider. So that data is to be stored in these memory locations. The address of the memory location is this, whereas the data should be available is stored in these memory locations. So you can see here in Little Endian, higher order data byte stored in higher memory location, and lower order data byte can be stored in the lower memory location. So here see you can see here, for example, for 4 byte long integer, so byte 3, byte 2, byte 1, byte 0. So what if you consider byte 3, that is A0, I will consider byte 3, A1, B1, C1. So this is total a 32-bit data, you can see. So that is, each number represents a 4-bit data. So since there are 8 numbers, so that constitutes a 32-bit data. So you can see here, this is nothing but the byte 3, byte 3. This is nothing but byte 2. This is nothing but byte 1, and this is nothing but byte 0. Now these bytes are stored in the memory locations. So in Little Endian, how the data will be stored here? So what is the byte 0 here? That is C1. What is the byte 1? That is B1. What is the byte 2 here? That is A1. What is the next byte, byte 3? That is A0. So this is how the data will be stored in these memory locations, if you consider Little Endian. Whereas if you consider a Big Endian method, so how the data will be stored here? The same data, if you consider the same data, so the byte 3 will be stored in the first address, that is A0, and the byte 2 in the next address, A1. The byte 1 will be stored in the next address, that is B1, and the next base address, in the next address it is storing C1. So this is how the data will be stored. If you consider Little Endian, the 32-bit data will be stored in this way. If you consider the Big Endian, the 32-bit, the same 32-bit data will be stored in this manner. I hope this is clear for all of you. You can see here in the Big Endian also, here the higher data order data byte stored in lower memory location, and lower order data byte can be stored in higher memory locations. So that is what I have explained in the this slide. Okay, so that is about the Little Endian and Big Endian. So this is all about the general purpose. So this is all about the general purpose computers, general purpose and domain specific processors. This is all about the general purpose and domain specific processors. We have seen microprocessor, microcontroller, and digital signal processors, and we have seen the differences between microprocessor and controller, RISC and CISC, Harvard and Von Neumann architecture, and that we have seen with the help of that we have explained with the help of the diagram here mentioned. And also we have seen what do you mean by Big Endian and Little Endian. Okay, now we'll see the application specific integrated ICs. And in general they call it as a ASIC. It is a microchip designed to perform a specific or unique application, and they reduce the system development cost by integrating several functions in a single chip. So in microprocessors or microcontrollers, they have some specific components built on that, or in microprocessor you cannot find any extra components, but in microcontrollers you will see that some components are there along with the processor part, that is CPU, whereas in ASIC, they are designed for a specific or unique application, and they reduce the system development cost by integrating some of the several functions in single chip. So if you want some DSP related algorithms, so that DSP part will be implemented on the same pitch, the same chip, like that. Along with the microprocessor and controllers, you can implement some of the DSP algorithms on the same chip here. So like that, they reduce the total system development cost by integrating several functions on a single chip, and it consumes small area in total systems, thereby helps in reducing system design with enhanced performance and functionalities. Because all the several or because of the many applications or many functions are implemented on a single chip, it consumes small area in the total system, thereby helps in reducing the system design with enhanced performance and functionalities. And ASICs can be prefabricated for specific application, or it can be custom fabricated using reusable components. So this is very important. So you can fabricate this ASIC for a specific application if you have if some person come with the specific idea to implement this ASIC. So he has some person has some requirement to design a ASIC, so he come up with that idea, he will give the inputs, and the manufacturer will fabricate this ASIC for him. Or that if if the idea what he has come up with, if he is flexible with the manufacturing process, that is it can be custom fabricated using reusable components. That if that application can be implemented with the help of ICs only, that is considering different IC applications, they integrate all the ICs separate, they take all the ICs separately, they integrate them, and they will make a ASIC for that person. So like that, it can be either prefabricated or it can be custom fabricated using reusable components. And fabrication of ASIC involves non-refundable initial investment. So this is very important. So this fabrication of ASIC, that is application specific IC, involves a non-refundable initial investment. So whatever the initial investment the manufacturer is putting, that is non-refundable. So if that ASIC is if that ASIC is if it becomes famous, then the manufacturer will be in he will be getting good money, or he will not be in the loss. Or if that is not famous, or it means all the efforts that are put by the manufacturer will go in vain. So that's why that investment is non-refundable initial investment. And since ASICs are proprietary products or owned products by the manufacturers, manufacturership of it may not be interested in revealing the internal details. So if there some application specific IC manufacturer has developed one ASIC, so it is for him to either reveal the internal architecture of that ASIC to the world or not. It is up to him. We cannot force him to publish the internal architecture of that ASIC. So that's why it is that's why I mentioned here, manufacturers of it may not be interested in revealing the internal details of it. So that is so that we cannot ask for with the manufacturers here. And next one is programmable logic devices. Programmable logic devices can be broadly categorized into fixed, programmable, fixed and programmable. These programmable devices, we have seen that the programmable devices only, we have seen programmable logic devices and programmable logic array in analog and digital electronics. So here also these logic devices can be broadly categorized into two types, that is fixed and programmable. And in fixed logic device, circuits are fixed or permanent. They perform one or fixed function once they are manufactured, and that cannot be changed. So there are two types of devices, fixed devices and programmable devices. So in fixed devices, once the manufacturer is manufactured that device, logic device, you cannot change or you cannot program that device once again. So whatever the fixed applications are there, only you can use those, and you cannot change the functionality of that. Whereas in programmable devices, they provide wide range of logic capabilities, speed and features, and you can reprogram here. Programmable devices, the user can program that PLD according to his requirement, but that is not the case with the fixed logic devices. And for designing programmable logic devices, they have inexpensive software tools to simulate and test their designs before making a live test circuit. So before developing a program for designing programmable logic devices, they have inexpensive software tools to simulate. So like in ADE we have used Xilinx ISA, that is IDE, we have used Xilinx IDE. So such simulation tools are available with the manufacturers. So what they will do, they will, before going to manufacturing a test circuit, they are going to simulate that if there are any corrections, they will make the corrections in the simulation part, and once the tests are okay, they will manufacture the live test circuit. And once the test circuit is working fine, they will go for the design of prototype. So once the test circuit, so simulation is a software part, so that software, if it is performing okay with the software, that is developed as a circuit here, test circuit, that is hardware. And once that test circuit is also working fine, they are going for the prototype here. So that prototype is nothing but a first copy of the working device. So that prototype is you can show that prototype to the customer who has asked for you, and once the customer approved that prototype, the final design will be used for mass manufacturing. Unless there is a approval from the customer, the manufacturer will not go for the mass manufacturer. So before mass manufacturing, all these processes he will go through. The manufacturer will go through all these processes. First he will simulate. If the test circuit is the simulation is okay, he will go for the test circuit. Once the test circuit is okay, he will go for the prototype. Once the prototype is okay, or that is approved by the customer, then only he will go for the mass manufacturing. Otherwise he will not go for the manufacturing. If the customer finds any defects in the prototype, the manufacturer will again go through all these processes once again, that is simulation, test circuit, and once again he will build the prototype. So unless the customer is satisfied by the prototype, the manufacturer will not go for the manufacturing. That you should remember here. And two major types of programmable logic devices are CPLDs and FPGA. So these are the very famous devices used by the electronics engineers, that is complex programmable logic devices, CPLD, and field programmable gate array, FPGA. So these are the very famous logic devices, programmable logic devices used by the electronics engineers. So if you compare CPLD and FPGA, you can see here CPLD offer much smaller amount of logics, up to 10,000 gates, but offer predictable timing characteristics. So CPLD can offer up to 10,000 gates, but that is compared to FPGA, this 10,000 gates is very small, but it offers a predictable timing characteristics. Whereas in FPGA, it offers highest amount of logic density. So the number of gates in FPGA is much more than this CPLD. It is much more than 10,000, and most of the features and high performance are compared to the CPLD. It is highest amount of logic density, that is what mentioned here. Number of gates are more, and it has most features and high performance compared to the CPLD. And one more thing you have to note here is FPGAs are preferred in prototyping most of the ASIC designs. So before going to develop any application specific IC, the manufacturer will use FPGA as a programmable logic device for before any manufacturing any prototyping. Okay. The next point is, that is fourth point, that is commercial off the shelf components, or they call it as a COTS, COTS. So COTS components are developed around general purpose processors or ASICs or PLDs. We cannot use this COTS in replacement of general purpose processors, or in replacement of ASICs, or in replacement of PLDs. They are used, these COTS are used along with these, but you cannot use this COTS as a GPA, general purpose processor, or you cannot use this as a ASIC, but you cannot use it as a PLD. So this is just a one component that is associated with, that is used with the general purpose processors, ASICs and PLDs, and they are designed in such a way to provide easy integration and interoperational abilities. They are designed for this integration and interoperational abilities with the existing system components. If there are certain system components are there, so to make an integration and interoperational ability between the two devices, we are using the COTS. If you consider an example, a remote controlled toy car, the toy cars, what you can see is an example of a COTS. So that is not exactly the example of COTS, because we categorize this remote controlled toy car as a example of a embedded system. So this embedded system has certain units. So here we are using this COTS. So here we are using this COTS exactly. In that toy we have a control unit circuitry. We have a control unit circuitry and RF circuit, that is radio frequency circuit. So if it is a remote controlled car, so we have a remote for that car, and there is a receiving circuitry available with the car. So to make communication between this remote and that car, so we use this COTS, and that is used in control unit circuitry and RF circuitry. And also COTS makes their space in high frequency microwave electronics. These are the application areas of COTS, that is high frequency microwave electronics and high bandwidth analog to digital converters, operational components at very high temperature, ultraviolet and infrared detectors. So whenever you find application areas like this, so we are using COTS there. Okay. And better you take one more example of TCP IP plugin module. So what the LAN cable has one plugin module, right, one pin. So that is available with the various manufacturers and is also one of the example of COT. So the LAN cable has one pin associated with that. So that LAN cable is connected to your PC. So the pin where you are connecting that to PC, that female pin, so that female pin is connected to your PC, and there is a communication between this LAN cable and your PC or laptop with the help of that pin, female pin. So this and that female pin what we are using in the PC, that can be an example of a COT. That is an example of COTS. That is, there may be many vendors, and there are many vendors or many manufacturers available for this COTS, but all perform the same operations. There are n number of manufacturers available with the who can manufacture that female plug-in contact with the LAN cable. There are many n number of manufacturers available, but though there are n number of manufacturers available, the operation of or the functionality of the each manufacturer what they are producing, they are of all same standards only. But the major drawback of using COTS component in the embedded system is it depends on the manufacturer. The manufacturer may stop manufacturing any COTS component, or he can withdraw the product, or they may discontinue the product if there is a rapid change in the technology. So now we are using Ethernet cable. If you consider this, there is some new technology coming which is advanced to this Ethernet. So in that case, the COTS are available with the technology Ethernet. But if this new technology is coming with other than this Ethernet technology, these COTS are of no use. So in that case, the manufacturers withdraw his product from the market. So that is one of the major disadvantage or drawback of the COTS. So this is about the COTS. And one more thing, all of you notice, all the comparison tables are very important for the exam point of view. So here how many comparison tables are there? So in previous video also we have differentiated between general purpose computing system and embedded systems. That is one of the comparison we have to make. Here it is one more available, that is microprocessor and controller. One more comparison you can make here is RISC and CISC processors, Harvard architecture and Von Neumann architectures. So these are all the comparison type questions, and definitely you may get any one or two questions. Among all these questions, you may get at least one or two in the final examinations. So better you prepare all the comparison tables perfectly, so that you may get minimum 8 marks or 6 marks from that. Okay. In the next video we will start with the third part of the module 3 that we'll see in the upcoming classes. Okay, thank you all of you.